growing quite quickly, actually, but he's a little fighter. He kind of he wriggles around quite a lot.
For 9 years, she was more than just a nanny. She was a pillar of stability in Prince George's royal upbringing. Maria Teresa Turrion Borrallo, the woman trusted with the future king's childhood, vanished from palace life in the blink of an eye. No farewell, no explanation, just an abrupt end to years of service. But what came after? Whispers turned into headlines. A quiet move stirred a royal storm. Now, behind the palace gates, tension brews because her exit wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.
By the way, you be careful what you say now, because these guys, they're filming it.
I know! And I think if they feel that you're doing the right thing, you can only be true to yourself, and you have to ignore.
The woman behind the prince. It all began quietly in March 2014. Prince George was just 8 months old, and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Prince William and Catherine, were preparing for a royal tour of Australia and New Zealand. But behind the scenes, they were also making a decision that would quietly but powerfully shape their firstborn's early years. That decision came in the form of a woman named Maria Teresa Turrion Borrallo. Born in Spain and trained at the elite Norland College in Bath, England, Maria wasn't just another nanny. Norland College is famous for producing highly skilled childcare professionals who are taught everything from child psychology to self-defense. Maria came with this rigorous training, a calm demeanor, and an ability to adapt instantly to palace life. She wore the traditional Norland uniform, brown dress, white gloves and matching hat, and blended into the background with quiet precision. To the world, she looked like any professional caregiver. But within the palace walls, she became something far more important. Maria wasn't chosen simply because she was qualified. She was chosen because she understood the royal family's most important need: discretion. In a world where every family move becomes tabloid fodder, Maria became a mystery. Present, trusted, but silent. She never gave interviews. She never appeared on talk shows. She didn't even show up in the background of royal events unless absolutely necessary. A former palace staff member once put it this way: her role was simple, but huge. Make Prince George feel like a normal child in a world that is anything but normal. Every morning, before the sun had even risen over Kensington Palace, Maria would quietly step into the nursery. She made sure everything was just right, from the temperature in the room to the perfectly ironed clothes laid out for the day. She prepared bottles and toys, adjusted the curtains to let in soft light, and created a world of gentle calm. To Prince George, she became a constant, a warm, predictable presence in a life surrounded by flashing cameras, security details, and royal protocols. George responded to Maria in a way only small children can. He laughed at her Spanish lullabies. He looked for her when he was tired, and when he stood one day in his playpen and said his first clear word, "Baba," it was Maria who heard it first. She didn't shout or call others in. She smiled softly, leaned in and whispered, "I heard you," as if it were a private secret between them. It was a small moment, but a powerful one. In that whisper was the unshakable bond between a child and the woman who helped shape his first memories. And that was just the beginning. As the months passed and Prince George grew from a curious toddler into a young boy, Maria's role deepened. No longer just a nanny, she became an emotional anchor, steady, calm, and fiercely loyal. But what hidden bond did Maria build that shaped Prince George's heart forever? Stay with us to find out. The hidden world Maria created for Prince George. Being a royal nanny isn't just a job, it's a life lived in the shadows of crown and ceremony. It's not about bedtime stories or keeping a neat schedule. It's about stepping into a world most people will never see, and finding a way to make it feel normal for the child at the center of it. That's exactly what Maria Teresa Turrion Borrallo did the moment she entered Kensington Palace in 2014. Maria wasn't chosen for her resume alone. She was chosen for her presence. Calm, steady, and deeply intuitive, she became the silent rhythm guiding Prince George's young life. From the start, she brought more than order. She brought something rare, gentle consistency in a life of glittering chaos. Everything under Maria's care had a certain pattern, a quiet elegance. Breakfast didn't just appear. It arrived at the exact same time each morning. Books were arranged just the way George liked them. Clothes were folded to his small but particular preference. These tiny, seemingly unimportant details grounded the young prince. For a child who felt the world more deeply than most, these moments mattered. They made him pause, light up, and sometimes whisper a soft, "Wow," when things felt just right. Maria noticed early that George craved predictability. Once, while chatting briefly with a fellow staff member, she remarked, "He likes knowing what comes next." That simple truth became her guiding rule. But her care went beyond routines. It held a quiet kind of magic. On Prince George's second birthday in July 2015, official photos showed a happy toddler beaming at the camera. But what no one saw was Maria, just out of sight, waving a stuffed animal and whispering silly Spanish phrases to make him giggle. She knew exactly how to make him laugh, not for the cameras, but because she understood his world better than most. She never broke palace protocol. No gossip, no attention, no missteps. But within the walls of the nursery, she created something warmer. She wasn't a mother, but she became something irreplaceable. The steady hand George turned to when he didn't have the words to explain how he felt. One morning, after a particularly tough start to the day, George stomped into the nursery and crossed his arms. Maria knelt beside him and asked gently, "Are you frustrated or just tired?" He looked up, eyes brimming, and said, "Frusted?" She smiled softly. That single moment gave him something powerful, a name for a feeling. It was more than comfort. It was growth. Maria also offered George glimpses into her culture. She taught him Spanish phrases like gracias and buenos dias. Sometimes, before sunrise, he would sneak into her room and whisper, "Buendas, Maria," beaming with pride at remembering her lullabies and soft corrections. They became more than words. They became a shared language of trust. By the time Prince George turned 5 in July 2018, Maria's role had long surpassed that of a caregiver. She was his safe place. That evening, after the grand party with guests, cameras, and royal protocols, she waited quietly with homemade cupcakes and a small wrapped toy. "Did you make these?" George asked. "Always," she replied. In a world shaped by duty and tradition, Maria built a space where George could simply be a child. No titles, no expectations, just laughter, puzzles, and soft lullabies echoing behind the nursery door. But even the quietest bonds are not immune to change. So how did a woman known for quiet lullabies become the center of a royal change no one expected? Here's where it takes a shocking turn. The day everything changed. Maria's quiet goodbye. It was a cool morning in early 2024 when Maria Teresa Turrion Borrallo was called into a small private room inside Kensington Palace. There was no dramatic announcement, no heavy tension in the air, just a gentle but unmistakable shift she had long known would come. Waiting for her were Prince William and Princess Catherine, both sitting with soft smiles and kind eyes. This wasn't just any routine conversation. This was the moment that would close a chapter nearly a decade in the making. For almost 10 years, Maria had been a steady, trusted presence in Prince George's life. But now, change was inevitable. According to palace insiders, William and Catherine's words were full of warmth and gratitude. Catherine's voice, steady but emotional, said, "You've helped shape our son. We couldn't have asked for more." William added his thanks, too, speaking with genuine respect for all the years Maria had quietly given. But then came the sentence Maria had both expected and quietly dreaded. "He's at a stage now where he doesn't need a nanny in the same way," William explained gently. Maria nodded, her face calm as always. She had known this day would come, but hearing it aloud still made her heart tighten. The royal family was moving forward, and George's development now required new educators and tutors. Her role, so essential for nearly a decade, had reached its natural end. After the meeting, Maria walked upstairs toward the nursery one last time. There, sitting by the window with colored pencils scattered across the floor, was Prince George. When he saw her, he stood up and placed his drawing to one side. "Mom told me," he said softly, his voice unsure but steady. "I don't want things to change." Maria smiled, kneeling beside him like she always did. She gently placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "You're growing up. And it's time." He didn't cry. Neither did she. But both understood that this was a moment they would remember. That night, long after the palace had gone quiet, Maria packed her small room tucked away in the staff quarters. There weren't many things she wanted to take with her. Just a few books, a worn-out stuffed animal she'd bought for George on a trip to Scotland, and a framed drawing he had made for her when he was 5 years old. Tucked alongside these memories was her personal journal, a quiet record of moments she had never shared with anyone. The following morning, as the sun rose over Kensington Palace, Maria and George had breakfast together for the last time. They sat in their usual corner spot, away from the noise of palace life. Before she left, George handed her a small, neatly wrapped package. Inside was a simple leather notebook. On the first page, written in his best handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for being my first teacher." Maria smiled, placed a soft kiss on the top of his head, and said nothing. Some goodbyes don't need words. That afternoon, she walked out of Kensington Palace the same way she had entered nearly 10 years before, through the quiet backstaff door. No press, no cameras, no official statement. Just silence and gratitude. But what happens next to a woman who spent a decade shaping the heart of a future king? That part of Maria's story was about to unfold. Maria's new beginning. When Maria Teresa Turrion Borrallo stepped away from Kensington Palace in 2024, there was no press conference, no glossy magazine cover, and definitely no tell-all book deal. She slipped into a new life, the same way she had served for almost a decade. Quietly, gracefully, and without fuss. Her new home was a small, modest flat tucked into a peaceful corner of West London. Far removed from the polished hallways and echoing chambers of royal life, her days now began with the soft clink of a kettle in her tiny kitchen and the faint sounds of city life outside her window. The packed schedules, early morning nursery routines, and late-night lullabies were gone. In their place was stillness, something she hadn't felt in years. At first, it was unsettling. Maria found herself waking automatically at 5:30 a.m., her body expecting the soft shuffle of George's little feet or a knock from a palace assistant holding the day's itinerary. But there was only quiet. And for the first time in nearly a decade, Maria let that quiet stay. One morning, she opened her journal and wrote in neat Spanish script, "Let the stillness teach you." This wasn't a breakdown. It was healing. Her heart had spent years moving to someone else's pace. Now, she was learning how to find her own. Occasionally, short messages arrived from the palace. They were formal and polite. Updates on George's progress with his new tutors or small gestures that spoke louder than words. One day, a plain brown package showed up at her doorstep. Inside, a forgotten blue cardigan, and a crumpled drawing of a dog, clearly done in George's hand. No note, no explanation. Maria pressed the drawing to her chest and smiled softly. "Gracias," she whispered, not with sadness but with gratitude for what had been. Maria stayed away from the spotlight. There were no interviews, no anonymous leaks to tabloids, and no subtle book deals. Her silence wasn't out of fear, it was out of love. George's childhood wasn't hers to share with the world. It was a memory she guarded, a piece of her heart she kept locked away. But she didn't isolate herself either. She reconnected with friends from Norland College, joined retired nannies for quiet cups of tea, and listened more than she spoke. When asked if she missed George, her answer was simple, sincere, and always the same. Of course. Then, 3 months later, came a phone call she never expected. The palace again. George was preparing for his first major public tour, an important milestone, and he wanted Maria there, just for a week. No publicity, no headlines, just her. She returned the only way she knew, through the same back gate she had walked through for years. George was taller now, his face more grown up, but the familiar sparkle in his eyes hadn't changed. Together, they reviewed his routine, just like old times. Before she left, George handed her a folded piece of paper. On the train home, she opened it. Another drawing of a dog, this time with the name Marta scrawled at the bottom. No explanation, just a quiet gift. Many thought that was the end of Maria's story, but she wasn't done yet. In the months that followed, she began building something deeply personal, a program called Quiet Hands, named after the phrase she used whenever George felt overwhelmed. "Quiet hands, George," she would whisper, reminding him to stay calm, grounded, and in control. Now, that same phrase became a lifeline for others, offering retired and transitioning nannies workshops, emotional support, and a place to belong. Maria never spoke of her royal years. She didn't need to. The way she listened, the way she offered comfort, made it clear. She had lived through something both beautiful and bittersweet. So, how did Maria's quiet goodbye leave an emotional mark both inside the palace and on Prince George himself? Keep watching. Life after Maria's goodbye. After Maria Teresa Turrion Borrallo quietly stepped away from Kensington Palace in early 2024, life inside the Cambridge household didn't pause. The royal machine, polished and precise, moved forward as expected. New tutors arrived, carefully chosen to shape Prince George's growing role as a future king. Speech coaches, etiquette advisors, and educational consultants became part of his daily life, each with a specific task: preparing the young prince for the public eye and the responsibilities waiting in his future. By the summer of 2024, George's schedule had changed dramatically. There were more formal outings, more rehearsed speeches, and carefully staged photo opportunities. At public events, he stood taller, smiled at the right moments, and said exactly what was expected of him. To the outside world, he looked like the perfect young royal, poised and polished. But behind the grand gates of Kensington Palace, whispers began to circle. Palace aides, staff who had watched George grow from a shy toddler into this new version of himself, noticed something different. The mischievous sparkle in his eyes, the spontaneous laughter, the soft moments of boyish wonder, seemed dimmed. There was a new seriousness about him, not unkind, not unhappy, just quieter. One longtime staff member reportedly said, "It's like the warmth of the nursery vanished the moment she left." The comment wasn't meant to criticize the new team. In truth, they were doing their best, but Maria had set a standard that was never part of any official job description. She had been more than a caregiver. She was the heart of George's early world, a constant, a gentle voice, the person who made him feel safe when everything else felt overwhelming. Though George never complained, the signs were there for those who looked closely. Often, he was seen carrying a small leather notebook, the very one Maria had given him on her last day. Tucked inside were short notes, scribbles, and simple stories she had written for him over the years. He never spoke about it, but just holding it seemed to bring him comfort. A silent, private connection to the woman who had quietly shaped his first understanding of love and trust. Prince William and Princess Catherine never expressed public regret. Their decision had been thoughtful, made with love, and a belief that George was ready for the next phase of his life. But palace insiders often wondered if the emotional cost had been higher than anyone expected. After all, when someone becomes part of a child's heart, their absence isn't just felt, it echoes. Maria hadn't just done her job. She had left a legacy, a quiet, lasting imprint on the boy who would one day be king. So how did one nanny's quiet presence leave an emotional mark the palace never anticipated? Stay with us to find out. How Maria Turrion Borrallo left a mark no crown could erase. Maria Teresa Turrion Borrallo never wore a crown, and she never wanted to. Her legacy wasn't shaped by titles or public applause. It was written in bedtime lullabies, in tiny first steps across a palace nursery floor, and in whispered Spanish phrases that only she and Prince George understood. While the world gazed at George as a future king, Maria always saw something else first. A little boy learning to feel, to ask questions, and to love. Behind the gilded walls of Kensington Palace, Maria's influence ran deep but unnoticed by most. Long after she packed her bags and left through the palace's quiet staff door in early 2024, her presence lingered. Teachers at George's school began noticing little things that couldn't be traced back to any royal training manual. One teacher reportedly said, "He's unusually kind for his age. He notices when someone's upset. That didn't come from a textbook, it came from Maria." For years, she had knelt beside him after difficult days and asked softly, "Are you sad or just tired?" She helped him name feelings that many children his age struggled to understand. She taught him that being strong didn't mean being silent, and that love didn't always need to shout. It could sit quietly beside you, speaking in small, gentle ways. At home, even months after Maria's departure, George still asked the questions she used to answer. "Why do people wave at us?" he wondered aloud. "Do all kids go to school? Who decides who's in charge?" But now the voices answering those questions were different. Maria's voice had shifted into something quieter, but more lasting, an internal dialogue George carried within him. Even when she wasn't there, she was still teaching him, still helping him grow. Maria's legacy was never designed for public view. That was the brilliance of it. Her most powerful work was done in the background. She wasn't just George's nanny. She had become the voice he would carry with him long after the world stopped mentioning her name. 6 months after she left the palace, Maria received a final handwritten note from Prince William and Princess Catherine. It was warm, personal, and full of thanks. She read it once, smiled softly, and placed it next to one of George's childhood drawings, a small, crumpled sketch of a dog, inside a drawer she rarely opened. No tears, no dramatic emotions, just a deep, private exhale. Maria moved on quietly as she always had. She dedicated herself to mentoring other nannies, guiding them through the emotional complexities of raising children who belong not just to families, but to history books. She never boasted about her time with George. In fact, she never even mentioned the palace at all. But every tip she gave, every story she shared with a new generation of caregivers was built on those years behind royal doors. When one young nanny asked her about saying goodbye to a child you love, Maria's answer was simple and heartfelt. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means believing your love still matters, even when you're not there. And George? By late 2024 and into 2025, as he appeared more often at public events, the world saw a boy growing quickly into his royal role. But for those who knew what to look for, there were quiet signs that Maria's influence hadn't faded. The small, thoughtful gestures, the way he listened before speaking, the leather notebook she'd given him, still often seen tucked under his arm at school functions. There was even a sweet moment when George handed a drawing of a dog to a guest at an event, an echo of the sketches he used to give Maria. Maria's farewell hadn't been loud or final. It was the kind of goodbye that lingers, that shows up when you least expect it, in how a child looks at the world, how he comforts a friend, how he handles the pressure of royal expectation with surprising emotional grace. Her real impact wasn't in headlines or public recognition. It was in small, permanent marks left on a growing boy's heart. But what do you think? Should the royal family have found a way to keep Maria close? Or did they truly underestimate her impact on George's life? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.